Zookeepers of Reddit. What's the lowdown? Dirty. Inside scoop on zoos? Rhinos may look super intimidating, and they can hurt you, but really they just act like big dogs. They love being scratched and will eat all the fruit out of your hand. Partner was a zookeeper in Dallas. Safety protocols for when a large, dangerous animal escapes its enclosure dictate that you lock yourself in whatever room you can get to quickest and grab the nearest weapon, which, for most zookeepers, was a broom or rake for cleaning up animal poop. I had to draft the zoo's contingency plan for all sorts of emergencies: flood, tornado, extreme heat, war or attacks, you name it. The plan included a prioritized list of which animals in the collection we would have to sacrifice to feed to the other animals in extreme situations. I literally created a zoo food chain. Humans were left off the list entirely. Some people like to bring fruit and stuff to throw into the animals' cages, even though they're not supposed to. If you're around and someone throws a pineapple into the gorilla or chimpanzee dens, GTFO, they will throw that thing full blast at someone. I saw a man get hit full force right in the side of the head and he was lights out. Pineapple exploded on impact. Paramedics came and everything. I volunteer at an aquarium and the people always ask about whether the sharks that are in with the fish ever eat the fish. Officially we say, we keep them well fed enough that they don't. But on more than one morning on my initial walk around I have found remains of fish that definitely weren't feed fish. On a particularly memorable occasion I found the head of a large porgy just sitting on the bottom. A diver went in and got it before guests arrived. Fun fact about the local zoo I learned when I worked maintenance. There is a wolf enclosure. There is info about the wolves. It's maintained. They are just shy, in their shelter ATM. There are no wolves. Never was. Lions know fully well that they can't get through the glass. They do that just to get attention. The poor penguin keepers can never quite get rid of the miasma of dead fish that envelopes them. As for me, the stinkiest job I ever had to do was cleaning out the duck ponds. Managed to empty a whole train carriage that evening, even though I had changed and my work clothes were double bagged. Used to work at a zoo a few years ago. An elephant died while I was there and to transport the body out of its enclosure they had to chop him up. Rip Toto. We closed the baboon exhibit because a baboon had a stillbirth and the troop was grieving. In reality they were throwing parts of the infant corpse around and there was nothing we could do about it. Dead zoo animals are sometimes fed to carnivores. There's a farm zoo in the UK that uses crocodiles to get rid of dead cows. The owner once said he'd like the same end when he dies. Worked in an animal refuge in Bolivia. We were told on our first day not to let the tapir turn its back on you. Forgetting that vital piece of info. 3 days later I was filming the tapir as it starts to turn its back on me and my friend. Before we could react, its schlong did a 180 and projectile calmed all over my phone and gaping mouth. We couldn't get rid of the smell for days. If you ever come close to a tapir, do not let it turn its back on you. Edit. Here's the video streamable. Com. C75Q4Z. I work with dolphins. These creatures are sexual as frock. We have 2 smaller boys together and they've been seen stimulating each other. Our 3 female dolphins have freshwater hoses that lead into the pool to play with. They flip themselves upside down, lay on the surface, and let the water do its thing. We also have another male dolphin separate from the others that likes to show his dig to families. Pretty funny to watch TBH. Dolphins are weird. I worked in 2 completely different departments, elephants and neonates, but the drama between keepers was insane in both. Like, attempted murder level insane. If you work with the animals there's a good chance you'll not be able to have any kind of social life. Between the long hours, weekends and the stench. I've been kicked out of stores after work because I apparently stunk way worse than I thought I did, even after scrubbing off. And I'm around animals every day. But I still can't stand when otter, sea lion keepers are around me in all hands meetings. The rotten fish plus ferrety otter smell combo is a gagger. Meanwhile, I work with apes, and they say that I smell like I haven't showed in a decade. Again, even after I shower. My wife was a zookeeper and I used to volunteer there a lot. 1. Most of zookeeping is just picking up poop and delivering food. 2. The animal that was least scary was a cheetah. They were pretty cool ignoring everything as long as they had food. The most scary to me were the giraffes. Back then you went into the enclosure with them and they'd sometimes swing their heads around and try to hit you just to be pricks. You had to be careful. 3. The job would actually be fantastic if they didn't let people into the zoo. Our lions will urinate on guests if they get too close. Which is always funny to see, not so funny to smell. I worked at a zoo in a northern country. Can't say which as it'll give it away. Which had a white tiger, and was quite famous for it. One day the zoo announced the tiger had died of natural causes, whilst working there a few years after he died. I was told by a keeper that there was actually a problem with the electric fencing in his enclosure that the zoo managers refused to pay to get fixed, thinking it would be fine. He was electrocuted to death a few weeks after they found the problem. They covered the whole thing up by saying they weren't sure how he died, but that he was old. It's still a zoo secret to this day. I worked with large tortoises. We had these 5-gallon buckets for cleaning the poop out of enclosures and other buckets for feeding them fresh grass we cut. The first day on the job I took both buckets into the pen and started by dumping out the grass. Then I went around to collect poop. I heard this awful loud grunting and something breaking. One of the 300-pound males tried to bang the bucket in front of visitors and flattened it. He would even follow me around just in case I might leave more innocent buckets unattended. I spoke to a zookeeper at the National Zoo in DC. We were watching another keeper inside the cheetah enclosure and I asked him about the danger involved. He said a cheetah is harmless to an adult human because it only hunts smaller creatures. I asked which creature was the worst to go in with, expecting hippo, elephant or croc as an answer. Without hesitating he said, zebras. Then leaned close and whispered they are the biggest as holes. They will bite and kick for no reason. I still think it's hilarious that off all the teeth and claws out there, it's stripped donkey horses that are the worst. Not quite a zookeeper but in training to be one. The zebras and Przewalski horses are ruthless and will tear apart any unfortunate wild kangaroo that dares break into an enclosure. They love the thrill of the chase, and the subsequent kill when they get bored. When you're cleaning underneath the perches, parrots will wait for you to look up before taking a sit. They have a good aim. That's how you get sit in the mouth. Don't look up. I'm a small animal vet now but worked in a zoo before vet school. Zoos are one of the biggest purchasers of Calvin Klein's Obsession cologne. The cologne has animal musk in it and it drives the big cats wild. We used to spray it on everything. Used to work at a zoo. Cold weather makes the animals more active, so go on a chilly day or first thing in the morning to see the best show from the animals. Also, those free-roaming peacocks are really stupid and sometimes go in the lions exhibit and get torn up. Edit. Because of lots of questions about where. This was the Tatfaz Park Zoo in Idaho. My mom worked at a zoo when I was a kid and there were some things that were kept under wraps. For one, a hyena escaped once and they had to track it down. Also, a pack of dogs got into the zoo and killed most of the wallabies. The worst story was that a group of teenagers broke in the 80s and pulled the legs off of the flamingos. That one always really bothered me. The bird sanctuary has a bird hospital attached to it full of sick dying birds and smells like Satan's anus. Our camels will spit if you piss them off. And it's not just saliva like most people think. You really don't want to upset our camels if you have any plans the rest of the week. Please and thank you. I used to volunteer weekly at a large zoo and at one point management started doing monthly dangerous animal escape drills. Someone would run around in a lion onesie and we'd have to react as if one of the large animals had escaped. It was hilarious, but one of the funniest things I was taught was that if an incident did occur you have to tell the nearby guests to get inside only once. If after that they refuse to follow you indoors, the protocol was to hole up in the large activity center buildings. You're to leave them there, go inside yourself and lock the doors. It makes sense because people can be very stupid and you don't want to risk everyone's lives because of one Karen. But it amused me no end that the protocol was to just let them get mauled. Not a zookeeper, but I'm a zoologist. Aquariums have captive breeding programs for some of the dolphins and whales, but they are too difficult to transport for mating, so they have to use artificial insemination, which requires semen samples from whales, which means that it's someone's job to give hand jobs to dolphins and whales in order to collect the sperm. It's part of the animal's training, and the whales will roll over and present their genitals on command. If you have to choose between cleaning the poop from a flamingo enclosure or an elephant enclosure, choose the elephants. The flamingos were by far the smelliest exhibit. An elephant poop is heavy but comparatively odorless. I heard about this from a coworker at a small zoo I used to work at. If any animal escapes before the zoo opens to the public, the zoo is supposed to shut down completely for the day. Often though, for smaller zoos they can't afford to lose a day open to the public, so if some specific types of animals escape, such as reptiles or small animals, they will just keep open while having keepers look for the animal. This sort of thing wouldn't fly by me on my days as a keeper. I never had anything escape other than a harmless tortoise. But I remember hearing from other coworkers that they just listened to our boss and opened even though a small but somewhat venomous snake was on the loose. I worked in the zoo's restaurant, so I didn't get a lot of info on the animal side of things. The one thing that even low-level cashiers learned, though, was the Mr. Wallaby code. The manager on duty in each department carried a walkie-talkie, and if an animal ever escaped, the code to announce its location was, Mr. Wallaby, please meet Mr. Escaped Animal. At animals location. I kinda hoped we'd have one with a small, harmless animal that would be easy to catch again, just to see the excitement. Making chicken salad sandwiches all day got a little monotonous. The big cats eat horse meat and the toads get fed pinkies, which are baby mice right after they are born. The amount of dumbasses who complain to management about paying to go to the zoo, then not seeing any animals is unreal. Like, what do you want us to do? Go in there with sticks and chase them out of their hidey holes? Sorry buddy, not going to happen. I did co-op at one for 2 weeks. The Sumatran tigers had a nice enclosure, but the overnight enclosure was very small and depressing. I would walk around the outdoor enclosure hiding meatballs while they were in there. And I was always scared someone would forget I'm out there. There's nothing like that smell of tiger urine. As soon as I first smelled it's like an instinct kicked in and all the hairs on my body raised as if I just knew there was something close that could kill me. Also, so many people drop money beneath the walkways. I found a few $5 bills. If you have worked with them then you probably already know. But one swift kick from an ostrich can kill you. Like they will literally disembowel you. Every time I see a video of someone getting up close to one, I can't help but cringe. One of our head keepers had actually lost part of their ear to one. The most dangerous, feared animal in case of an escape is not, as you may think, lions, tigers or other large carnivores. It's the chimps. Those things will rip your arm off and beat you to death with the bloody end as soon as look at you. Everybody is overeducated and wildly underpaid. Typically most single people can last about 2 to 3 years before they have to move on. The ones with longevity have spouses who bring home the bread and let them chase their dreams. Winters suck. Part-time hours and being outside in the cold. The dolphin trainers are stuck up. They are like the jocks in high school. They usually try to stay in shape because wetsuits aren't flattering. They perform daily and people love them so they have an ego. You dread when a coworker gets pregnant because you'll have to pick up extra tasks. The path to being a keeper is rough. It can literally start with working a concession stand at a zoo with a college degree making minimum wage. And the path to mobility being talking to the other keepers to the point they'll let you clean the cage of the animals they keep. Do that a few years and hope that position opens. Not necessarily one that you want, but any. Because getting in the door is hard. High demand, low supply. It is a job where you really need to love the work and be okay not making much money. Source. Friend followed this path at a zoo that is known the world over. Animals sometimes kill other animals and there really isn't much that can be done about it. I remember when a groundhog made it into a chimpanzee exhibit and the baby of the group found it. She caught it and played with it for a long time. Eventually, to keep it from running away, the baby beat it to death right beside the viewing windows. She then held it like a stuffed teddy bear for another half an hour, dragging it around with her when she went to forage. Mind you, this happened right in front of a group of school children. I was in the viewing area and a teacher, chaperone, insisted that I do something. Like, what? Ma'am, that's a chimpanzee. Nobody's doing anything. The kids actually learned something on that trip to the zoo, though. Zoo work is like a lot of not-for-profit work. You do it for the love, not the money. Love doesn't pay the bills, so not everyone lot along. The ones that do are usually a little kooky. The squirrels get in for free. There's no dirty secrets as far as shady practices or anything. But if you mean literally, oh yeah, it's dirty. I cleaned up over 100 pounds of cat shit just today, and even after I showered my husband still says I smell overwhelmingly of cat pee. Not a zookeeper but worked in a zoo's warehouse for a couple years. Next time you go, ask someone which animals are kill on sight. In an escape, the answers will surprise you. Lions and tigers are typically on the trank and capture list, but a jaguar the size of a golden retriever is KOS. The zoo I was with, the 2 jags were the only animals on site that were on the shoot to kill list. Even the silverback was the trank first list. Edit to answer. Why? Jags will kill for sport, and if they escape they will claim an area as their own, then hunt and kill anyone in that area that they perceive as a threat to them, or their food. All those videos of jags rubbing their paws on the glass near children, they weren't hungry. The kids just look fun to kill to the jag. Coming in a little late, but I was a zookeeper for roughly 6 years. The inside scoop that most guests don't realize how little most zookeepers are paid. It's a field that quite often suffers from the same fate teaching, at least in the US. Share. Lots of highly motivated, passionate people who are willing to deal with low pay in order to do what they love. I can name quite a few of my past coworkers who have left just because they simply couldn't afford to live with such a low salary. So, my best friend is a zookeeper. Birdkeeper? At a zoo that has a renowned aviary. He has told me that most birds are just constantly thorny and are never gentle. If you wear anything bright, they will try to frock any appendage that gets near them. They're also smart enough to be vindictive about it. And not just males. He has a mortal feud with a female hornbill for similar reasons. His stories are great. Flamingos are territorial as holes. Whenever I cleaned their enclosures I would have to go in with an umbrella to scare them away to prevent them from attacking me. Hippos use their tail to fling their poop everywhere. Less than H2 greater than less than H2 greater than. Stay out of their splash zone. Be careful walking by the open-air monkey enclosures. Because poop isn't the only thing they'll fling at you. It's like that scene from Silence of the Lambs. When Clarice is going to see Hannibal Lecter. You know the scene I mean. Only much, much worse. Edit 1. Source: worked at a small local zoo as a teen for a summer. Primarily in the primate enclosure. I've seen things. Man. Unspeakable, horrible things. Edit 2. Before you ask, yes. Yes they did. Yes I have. Barf. This isn't a zoo I worked at but did visit often. Operators couldn't figure out why the sharks in the mixed species tank kept turning up dead, so they set up a couple cameras and it turned out there was a frocking psycho octopus just killing for fun. Hiding between rocks, waiting, and then just strangling them to death. I volunteered at a zoo for approximately 4 years. The otters ate absolutely anything they could get their paws on, in an open-air exhibit that included a lot of birds and squirrels. The same is true for just about any carnivore, omnivore in an open-air exhibit. It's just that the otters were particularly good at it. Not a zookeeper, but worked at one for a long time. We had a tram tour that drove over a bridge where there were a bunch of crocodiles below. If someone were to fall out of the tram at this point, the protocol was to speed out of the area as fast as possible so the remaining visitors on the tram would not see the unfortunate person get teared to shreds by the crocs. The baby chicks you see in the zoo farm are food for the reptiles and other animals. There are also animals that were raised by humans that never rehab, but this isn't told patrons so they don't continue to interact with the animals as pets. There's a behind-the-scenes chimp and gorilla enclosure with apes that won't ever rehab. There is a female chimp that is the most aggressive and she absolutely hates men. She was tortured by catchers who cut off her arm. She is too dangerous to keep with other chimps, so she has lived in solitary confinement for over a decade now and won't ever live like the other apes in captivity. Pretty tame. But 10 years ago I worked in the restaurant of a zoo, and we sold this homemade African soup in this themed restaurant, but in reality it was Chinese vegetable soup from a bag. Also from the employee lunchroom we could see the inside of the giraffe enclosure that guests could not see. There were several tallies being held, ranging from zookeeper slipping in poo to amount of giraffe erections. In high school I worked at the Jacksonville Zoo, just doing super basic stuff. We had an exhibit of river otters and one morning the staff noticed there was an extra otter. Not a baby, an extra adult otter. They looked through the security cameras and found that a wild river otter was making his way from the nearby street, Johns River, and getting into the exhibit to play with the other otters. Because of the risk of disease transmission we couldn't allow the wild otter to keep doing that, so they reinforced the exhibit to keep it out. It took like 5 attempts for them to finally make a wild otter-proof exhibit. It was an ongoing problem for like a year. Zookeepers can only stand to hang out with zookeepers of the same kind of animal because of the smell. No matter how much you scrub or change, the smell clings. Primate keepers smell like they haven't bathed in a decade. Snake keepers smell cloyingly unnerving. And sea lion people make you gag from the fish smell. I worked an extra job at a major big city zoo in a concessions area. I had a golf cart to get around delivering supplies and maintaining equipment in the various concession stands. The best part was that I could go where the public couldn't go, and petting the rhinos' faces and horns in the rear of their enclosures at a hugely strong steel fence was the highlight of my weekend. Dirt? I do recall that about 3 or 4 months after the concessions company started selling a well-known named frozen yogurt, I was standing with the concessions manager and his assistant when I heard the assistant make an offhanded observation. "Man, this yogurt is selling like crazy." And then the manager replied, "You're right. Let's raise the prices." And what do you do with all of the poo from all of the animals at the zoo? Ondu's book doesn't actually answer the damn question. Edit. Thanks for all the answers. I'll be showing this to my kids when they wake up. Not a zookeeper, but married to one. She's really there for the animals. And doesn't care to deal with the general public. And especially loathes the people who yell or scream at the animals. Or people who can't control their kids. Or who tell them to make the animals do something or come out. Or who make the same mundane comments like, "Must be a human exhibit," when the keepers are in an enclosure. There's usually not a day that goes by where I don't hear another rant about some annoying patron or patrons at the zoo. In the Oza zoo world, all animals are on birth control. When it's time to breed, the keepers will go on a database similar to eHarmony for zoo animals to find the perfect match for their animal. It takes years sometimes to get the right couple together, transferred, adjusted to each other, etc., all to have one baby. This is to prevent inbreeding and overpopulation. Zoos are there to educate, not populate species, and only do so to keep the zoo population healthy, since no zoo takes from the wild or breeders. Looking at Tiger King. I volunteered at an animal rehabilitation sanctuary a while back. When I went to clean the ducks' enclosure, I found out that the males will rape if given the opportunity. I used to work at one as a university student. We found a human finger in the tiger enclosure. But nobody stated they had their finger bitten off, employee or guest. So where did it come from? The old zookeeper just shrugged and tossed it in the garbage. WTF. I quit when I caught a virus from the lion-tailed macaques. Don't accept community service at a zoo as an alternative sentence. If you committed animal abuse, you'll be better off in jail. Knew a dumbass who kicked a neighbor's dog out of anger. Got the choice between 3 months in jail or 500 hours of community service at the zoo. He chose the zoo, and predictably, those zookeepers made his life hell. Made him sift through the zoo restaurant's dumpsters to look for recyclables, with only thin gloves on. Made him sift through 1,000+ pounds of sit looking for guests, lost items that could have been thrown out. Made him do paperwork in a room adjacent to the penguin waste dumpster where he said you could taste the rotten fish in the air. He lasted about a week and then took the jail time. Zookeepers are expected to have degrees and like 5 years of practical experience before they're employed, and then they're paid basically minimum wage. Not a zookeeper, but lived next to the Atlanta Zoo for 15 years and used to drink with a few. The Atlanta Zoo does a lot of work with primates. One way to tell if a keeper is a primate specialist is to see if they have all their fingers. Some primates bite, and they love to bite off fingers at the last joint. Also, watching a video of several keepers trying to get a chimpanzee back into his enclosure was one of the funniest things I think I've ever seen. He wasn't fighting them, just not interested in going back in. By the time it was done, about 15 minutes, I think 3 of them had black eyes. Not a zookeeper but do animal cognition research in zoos. Biggest thing I learned was that many zookeepers love their animals. That the Association of Zoos and Aquariums, AZA, has really high standards for care, and that many species have a nationwide breeding program. So that new baby chimp you see at the zoo, that was planned far in advance. The genetic variation between parents and within the social group was carefully calculated, and there may have even been a swap out of another animal to make space for the baby. Basically, all that stuff about zoos being sad and unethical are the exception, not the rule. Good zoos are there to conserve, protect, and make sure that their animals are healthy both physically and cognitively. Monkeys will in fact try to have sex with a female human if there is an opportunity to. The more you know. Not a zoo, but I worked at a local science center as a part-time guide, and one of our most popular exhibit was this incubator with baby chicks. We were told to tell visitors that the older baby chicks would be sent to schools as classroom pets or to the petting zoo. In reality, we did send the chicks to the zoo as live animal feed for the snakes and other carnivores. If you see a zookeeper doing a training session and they do not have a microphone on them, please do not try to talk to them. I have to step up with our jaguars multiple times a day in full view of the public. 95% of the time people are shouting questions at me mid-training session. I'm working with a dangerous animal that could kill me, or seriously injure me even through the barrier that's always between us. All of my attention needs to be on that animal. Please do not talk to me until I am finished. Any other time. I absolutely love talking to people about the animals I work with. I work with chimps in an amazing sanctuary. Some were pets, were used in labs, oops babies, etc. Even after taking multiple evolution classes in college, I never quite had the same understanding of how close we are to them until now. Just their behaviors with themselves, each other. And this just makes it all make sense. It's a hard feeling to describe. I wish I could share that with the world. On a side note, please do not support anything involving having primates as pets. Pet primates are dangerous, and they are physically and mentally destroyed forever. Also, if anyone has any questions about sanctuaries, zoos in the field, feel free to comment. IANAZ. But have received a few tips from more knowledgeable people. Go to the zoo on a cool day. On a nice sunny day, all the animals will prefer to stay indoors or out of the sun. Wear black clothes, it's much easier to see. And photograph through glass when your own reflection isn't getting in the way. Get there early and immediately move to further reaches of the zoo. If you're ahead of the crowd, you'll see more interesting behaviors as the animals won't be so bored of people yet.